Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for people to tune in before I get started. So just bear with me. Again, I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes for people to tune in before we get started. While we wait, I want to encourage people to follow me on Instagram at New Poss Blog. That's New Poss, and that's spelled POSS blog. Follow me on Twitter, to check out my tweets, and also I have a page on Facebook under the name New Possibilities. So I hope that people can follow me. I see that we have a couple of people in the house. If you are interested in joining this particular live stream, I may open it up and send a link. This is my first time sharing the link on this StreamYard platform. But if you're interested, please let me know and I'll try to bring you on board after I make my comments. So I want to thank people for tuning in. I'm sure that by now many of you have heard the news about Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon had an interview with Professor Griff, a former member of the group Public Enemy. And that interview was like an hour and a half, if I'm not mistaken. And now that interview is no longer available on YouTube. It was taken down. I don't know if Nick Cannon took it down on his own or if it was taken down by YouTube. But I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't taken, if it was taken down by YouTube, because this brother is under a lot of pressure. And I'm going to go through all the details, but he has basically been canceled on various platforms. Various programs of his have been canceled because of statements that were made on that particular program. And I'm going to go into some of the statements that were made, and then I'm going to share some of my thoughts about this whole situation. So the first thing I'm going to do is just provide some summary of some things, and then I'll go into the actual articles to talk about some of the things that he's saying, that they say that he made, certain statements that he made. So I'm going to go to the articles, read those articles. But it's just unfortunate that the whole video has been taken down from YouTube, because I would just post a link and tell people to watch the video for themselves so that they could judge it for themselves. But it seems like, they want to silence this brother instead of actually presenting facts to refute some of the things that he was saying. If somebody is making an argument that doesn't make sense, or if it's not backed up with actual facts, it would be easy to dispute that. But instead of doing that, instead of disputing the facts or the statements or assertions that this brother put out here, they basically want to silence him. And, I just think that that's fundamentally wrong. If an idea is weak, it should be challenged in the marketplace of ideas. But I'm going to get into some of the things that he said. Shout out to Lashib for you. I'm going to read your comments as soon as I get a chance. Shout out to the Up channel. Thanks for tuning in. I'm really interested in hearing what people have to say about, this whole controversy. So the brother had Professor Griff on his program, and this was over the weekend, if I'm not mistaken, not that long ago. And now this brother is being persecuted. And, I'm going to go into details about that. But he had Professor Griff on the program, and they were talking about everything that happened with Professor Griff. Those of you who know the history of Public Enemy know that this brother was a part of the group. He was the Minister of Information for Public Enemy, and he was actually kicked out of Public Enemy. because of some statements that he made about Jews. And, you know, on Nick Cannon's show, he was talking about those statements and the controversy and all that kind of stuff. And basically, during this discussion, they were talking about how Black people can't be anti-Semitic because Semitic people are Black people and that Black people are Semitic people. You know, so that was one of the points that they raised during this discussion. Also, they talked about, you know, the issue of Jewish people in politics and in entertainment. And also they talked about the Rothschilds. They talked about all that kind of stuff, you know, about these ideas of Jewish influence over entertainment, over information, and over banking and stuff like that. And because of that, you know, they're saying that this brother is anti-Semitic because they had a discussion of those particular issues during this interview. You know, none of these people that have canceled Nick Cannon have said, no, you know, Jews do not have a dominant voice in entertainment. None of them have come back and said that. None of them have said, well, no, there's no influence of Jews in banking or anything like that. Instead, what they did is they just canceled this brother instead of actually refuting what he had to say on those particular subjects. And again, you know, I don't think that that's the best way to deal with situations. Like, I think that, for instance, you know, like I know that Lashid For You did a video rebutting some statements that David Duke made. I did a video as well on that subject. David Duke was on this YouTuber's program and he was making all these ridiculous claims and racist statements and all that kind of stuff. Instead of simply condemning that hate monger for being what he is, a hate monger, we came back with information, you know, challenging a lot of the things that he said. But I don't see anybody really doing that with Nick Cannon. Nobody's really challenging any of those statements, those general statements that he was making that I just mentioned. And to me, that speaks volumes in and of itself. You know, the question is, you know, in terms of actually rebutting what he had to say, the question is, who is a dominant voice in media? You know, who owns these networks? You know, during their discussion, they talked about how there are basically 6 networks that own and control most of media. Who owns those networks? Who owns, you know, most of the banks and all that kind of stuff? Those are simple questions that should be answered instead of just, you know, automatically labeling somebody as an anti-Semitic for simply raising the questions or even making assertions about that. If those statements are exaggerated, those statements about ownership and influence are exaggerated and false, prove them to be false with actual facts. Don't just persecute somebody for making those kind of statements. And, you know, I want to be perfectly clear. I don't condone, you know, anti-Jewish sentiment. You know, I don't support that at all. You know, I think that people should be free to practice whatever religion they choose to practice, and they shouldn't be condemned because of what religion they're a part of or what ethnic group they're a part of. But if somebody raises certain arguments, you shouldn't just outright just label somebody without addressing the arguments that they're raising. And that's the problem that one of the problems that I have with the response to this whole situation. And I think that this overreaction tends to feed a lot of these so-called conspiracy theories. When you see that because this brother had a short interview with the brother from Public Enemy, and because his statements were controversial, you see how he's being stripped of everything, stripped of all the shows that he's involved in, his videos taken down off of YouTube. And I wouldn't be surprised if they don't go after Howard University for allowing him to have the program on Howard University. That kind of power that they're exercising over that brother, basically trying to shut him down and make him bow down, that does nothing but feed these ideas that of influence and of power of certain groups of people. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is the other part of what he was saying. He talked about the whole thing about lack of melanin. He talked about how melanin gives people soul and compassion. And he was talking about how, because of the lack of melanin and this fear of genetic annihilation, you have this racist reaction of white people. He talked about how there's a lack of compassion because of this lack of melanin. He says with melanin comes compassion. Melanin comes with soul. He talked about how because these people, white people, have less melanin, or they don't have any melanin, as a matter of fact, that they're less. Those are the actual terms that he used. He basically implied that they're less. He said they don't have any compassion. They're acting out of fear, low self-esteem, deficiency. And he talked about how they have this reaction where they rob, steal, and kill to survive. And he went on to describe them as savages and things of that nature because of their reaction to situation. He talked about how they're acting like animals, they're attacking like animals, and they're doing what they need to survive. So because of those remarks, he's not only labeled as anti-Semitic, they're saying he's, implying that he's anti-white as well because of those particular statements. And, I want to talk about that real quick. I want to talk about what I think about those particular statements. First of all, like I think that a lot of the talk about melanin is pseudoscience. I don't think that that's a real explanation as to why things are the way they are. I don't think it's a real explanation of history. I just think that it's pseudoscience. I think that at the end of the day, the racism and white supremacy that we see is a result of a lot of it is rooted in economics. You have a capitalist class that is exploiting the people of the world. And with this myth of white supremacy, they use this myth of white supremacy to divide people and to conquer people. And, they are driven by their desire to control resources and to dominate. That's what it comes down to. These nations, like these colonial powers that went into Africa, they didn't go into Africa because the people had melanin in their skin. They went into Africa to seize resources. Resources like gold, oil, and other types of resources. So that's why they colonized Africa. And they enslaved people because it was profitable to enslave them. So I don't think that it's something just about simply melanin. And I think that this whole idea of white supremacy, one aspect of what they said was correct in terms of like some of these white supremacists who do fear genetic annihilation, these white supremacists that believe in that philosophy, they fear genetic annihilation. And you see that all on YouTube, white genocide, all these types of terms. They fear the intermingling of white people with non-white people. They fear the browning of America. So that aspect of what he was saying is in fact true. But, I don't think that because somebody has less melanin, that they have automatically certain types of traits or that they're lesser of a human being than other people. I think that people are taught to be racist. People are miseducated into believing the myth and lie of white supremacy. White supremacy is propaganda. No one is born being a white supremacist or a racist. They are taught that. And we have a system that indoctrinates people to believe that kind of stuff. So I disagree with that whole notion that because somebody doesn't have melanin, that they're less than somebody that has melanin. Because if it was a case of simple genetics, Black people wouldn't be in the position that we are in as a people. And I'll just leave it at that. Like, we would not be in the position that we are in if we were simply genetically superior to other people. Um, so I just think that the situation is far more complicated than that. I think it's an oversimplification. And I think that that's an example of someone basically promoting the idea that Black people are superior to white people. And that's, to me, a reaction to white racism. I wouldn't say that it's racism. You know, I'm not going to say that Nick Cannon is a racist or people who subscribe to that viewpoint are racist. I'm not going to say that because racism involves power. Racism involves influence. It's not just about like what somebody thinks or somebody's philosophy about anything. It's much more than that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go into some of the comments that were made. You know, I'm going to go into how the newspapers characterize what Nick Cannon had to say. I'm also going to read some excerpts from his statement in response to this whole controversy. And then, I'm going to talk about like some of the reaction of some celebrities like 50 Cent and Diddy and all that kind of stuff. So just bear with me. Just 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. So again, I want to thank people for tuning in. So this says that Nick Cannon was dropped by ViacomCBS over anti-Semitic comments. And it has anti-Semitic in quotes. It says that Nick Cannon's quote unquote hateful speech and anti-Semitic theories led Viacom to cut ties with the TV host and producer. And one thing I'll say about this, although I disagree with his statements about melanin, I will say this, like, I don't think that he was speaking out of hatred. Like, I don't think that he hates white people or anything like that. That's not the impression that I get. I don't think that he was speaking out of malice or anything like that. I think it's a exaggeration to call what he was saying hate speech. It's an attempt to explain the order of things in this world. We live in a world where Black people are oppressed. We live in a world that's dominated by white people. We live in a world where there's been a long history of colonialization. There's been a history of enslavement of Black people. And even today, we got Black people being oppressed at the hands of these police. So I think that what he's doing is trying to explain this reality that we live in. It is not hate speech for someone to try to explain things. When you look at the crimes that have been committed at the hands of this white man, I can understand why someone would raise these particular questions. When you look at the enslavement of Black people for over 400 years in this country, stripped of everything, like in the words of the brother Khalid Muhammad, stripped of our language, our culture, our religions, our gods, our belief systems. When you look at that, when you look at the rape of Black women at the hands of the slave master, the beatings, the ripping apart of Black families for hundreds of years. And then when you look at the Jim Crow era, the lynching of Black people, when you look at Black people being denied basic human and civil rights in this country, I can understand, like in light of that history, why somebody will raise these questions or make those particular types of statements or assessments of white people. When you look at what's going on today, with these police killings of Black people. So, I understand where this brother was coming from. I understand where people are coming from with those statements. It's a reaction to the hate that Black people have experienced. It's a reaction to the oppression that Black people have experienced. And they want to condemn this brother. They want to persecute this brother like he did something major or something like that. When you got police killing black people and they go for months staying on the job after they murder black people, like in that Breonna Taylor case. Like 3 months after that sister was killed at the hands of the police, the cop was finally fired. And no charges have been brought. But here you have a brother who makes a couple of statements doing a podcast, and he's instantly canceled, and his whole career is in jeopardy because of this. And, you know, I'm going to go into some more points about this, but let me just go back into this article. So it says that Viacom condemns bigotry of any kind. We categorically denounce all forms of anti-Semitism. And it says that they're terminating their relationship with Nick Cannon. It says that the company's move was in response to remarks made by Cannon on a podcast in which he and Professor Griff discussed racial bias. And it said that the podcast was filmed last year, but it aired 2 weeks ago. And it says, we have spoken with Nick Cannon about an episode of his podcast, Cannon's Class on YouTube. So they talked to him about that. It says, while we support ongoing education and dialogue in the fight against bigotry, we are deeply troubled that Nick has failed to acknowledge or apologize for perpetuating anti-Semitism, and we are terminating our relationship with him. We are committed to doing better in our response to incidents of anti-Semitism, racism, and bigotry. So it talks about how he produced the Wild and Out improv series on VH1. He was a part of other TV shows like America's Got Talent and The Masked Singer. So it goes on to say this. It has a quote from Nick Cannon where he says, I do not condone hate speech nor spread of hateful rhetoric. The Black and Jewish communities have faced enormous hatred, oppression, persecution, and prejudice for thousands of years, and in many ways have and will continue to work together to overcome these obstacles. And then he went on to talk about how he's an advocate for people's voices to be heard openly, fairly, and candidly. And it goes on, and I may read some of those excerpts later. And it also talks about how Kareem Abdul-Jabbar made statements about anti-Semitism. And he talked about how there's a shocking lack of indignation around the issue of anti-Semitism. So that's that article. So there's a couple of things that I want to say before I move on to the next article, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. To talk about these other things real quick. You know, this whole situation brings to mind a couple of things. You know, first of all, just seeing how this brother is being canceled and how everything's just being taken from him because of these statements, it just makes it abundantly clear that we need an independent Black media. You know, when you don't have your own, you are basically living at the, on the whims of somebody else. So if somebody else controls the media and you're just an employee of that particular group of people, then you can be easily canceled. Your voice can easily be wiped out. When these people are feeding you and you literally bite the hand that's feeding you, they can cancel you. They can destroy your career. And that's what has happened here. You know, this is a reminder that we need to have our own media. You know, us with these YouTube channels, you know, in some ways that's similar to us having our own voice. But even here on YouTube, um, these people have control because we don't own YouTube. So a video can be taken down for hate speech. Channels can be taken away for what they call hate speech and all that kind of stuff. We don't own this. We need to have our own so that we're not subjected to somebody else's dominance. And that's what's happened here. And Nick Cannon should not be surprised at all that this would happen to him. Like, he really shouldn't be surprised at all, because he, you know, if you're saying the industry is dominated by a group of people, and then you speak out against these particular groups, you know, this particular group of people, you can expect that they're going to react in a way that's not going to be in your best interest. So he shouldn't be surprised at all by what has happened. Another thing is, you know, and I will get to your comments in a second. So he shouldn't be surprised. So if you're saying, making all these statements about how these people control all this stuff, and then you're going to speak out against them, you can expect that this would happen. If you're going to talk about a group of people and you're saying that they're less and all this and that, you can expect that they're going to treat you the way that they did in this particular situation. So yeah, that's something to think about. So let me see. There are some other points that I want to make before I think I'm going to make a couple of other points. So let me go back to a couple of these articles, and then I'm going to go to Nick Cannon's full statement. I'm going to read some of the things that he had to say in his statement. So just bear with me a second. I'm going to share my screen again. So let me go to Nick Cannon's statement. Just bear with me a second. I thought I had it up, and now it's, just bear with me. I just got to scroll through this, my Facebook page. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so here's his statement. It's rather long, and what I'll do is I'll put a link. I'll put a link in the description to the video so that y'all can check it out for yourself. So he titles it Truth and Reconciliation. And he says, I'm deeply saddened in this moment so close to reconciliation that the powers that be misused an important moment for us all to grow closer together and learn more about one another. He says, instead, the moment was stolen and hijacked to make an example of an outspoken Black man. Now, I want to go into that, make an example of an outspoken Black man before I proceed more into this statement. And that's basically what you have here. You know, these people like to make examples of outspoken Black men by persecuting them. We saw what happened to Colin Kaepernick. This brother, he didn't even make any controversial statements. You know, he didn't make any statements about Jews or white people. This brother simply decided to kneel during the playing of the national anthem to condemn police brutality in this country. And what happened to that brother Kaepernick? The brother was persecuted. The brother was blackballed, blacklisted, and denied job opportunities simply because he made a political statement about police brutality. This, you know, the police brutality that's been plaguing us for decades. He had the courage to speak out against that, and that brother was persecuted. You have many leaders in our history that were not just blacklisted and blackballed and all that kind of stuff like what's happening to Nick Cannon and Kaepernick. You have Black leaders that were actually killed by this establishment, murdered by the government under the government's counterintelligence program. And this is not some conspiracy theory. This is actual facts. All you have to do is Google counterintelligence program. You could probably go on the FBI's website itself to find out information about the counterintelligence program, where these people literally assassinated Black leaders. Not only did they assassinate them, they arrested them, had them locked up on trumped up charges, and some of them are still locked up today. You have Black Panthers who are still in jail today. So yeah, this is something that happens to outspoken Black men and women. You know, I was reading something about even that activist, Sean King. And, you know, I don't always agree with everything he says or what he's all about. But that man is being threatened. And the same thing is happening to Nick Cannon. He's being threatened and all that kind of stuff. Sean King has to have private security guard him 24 hours, according to a post that he put up today. So this is a society that has no tolerance for outspoken Black men. They don't have tolerance for that. They like their Black men weak and submissive to the system. So Nick Cannon goes on to say this, you know, this is his statement. I just had to make that point about the whole outspoken Black man. So he went on to say, I will not be bullied, silenced, or continuously oppressed by any organization, group, or corporation. I'm disappointed that Viacom does not understand or respect the power of the Black community. So this statement goes on, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I encourage you all to read it for yourself. Again, I'll post a link in the description box to this particular live stream. So I want to move on to some other developments regarding this. I guess I'll go to 50 Cent first. You know, so 50 Cent, you know, made some negative remarks about this whole situation, you know, used this as an opportunity to kick Nick Cannon while he's down and everything. And I don't know if this post is still up on his page, because originally I tried to click on the original post, but I couldn't get to it, but it may still be up. But somebody did a screenshot of the page, and basically you have 50 Cent doing what he does, troll people and all that kind of stuff. He says, damn, Nikki, what the fuck was you on that stupid ass podcast talking about? No more wilding out, huh? Don't worry, be happy. And then he has some hashtags right here. So you had this guy, this coon 50 Cent, mocking this brother for making his statements. And whether you agree or disagree with Nick Cannon's statements, you know, the fact of the matter is you have to respect an outspoken Black man talking about racial issues and all that kind of stuff. So you had this coon 50 Cent bashing this brother, you know, taking delight in his brother's career being taken from him for some statements that he made. And again, this is like an example to put everybody in line. You know, I heard about this football player who made similar statements about Black people being the original Hebrews or whatever, and he's been under fire and persecuted and stuff. So you got this 50 Cent, you know, putting out this. And that brings me to a point that I just want to talk about, and that's hypocrisy. That's hypocrisy that we see. You have Black rap artists that can talk about all kinds of things without any kind of consequences at all. They can talk about shooting people. They can talk about kidnapping people. They can talk about rape. They can talk about pimping women, abusing women. They can talk about selling drugs, using drugs. They can talk about virtually destroying the Black community, and they are not canceled. In fact, they are celebrated. In fact, they are elevated. In fact, they are showered with all kinds of praise and accolades and stuff like that by the entertainment industry. But you have a brother that gets on a podcast and simply raises some questions about power, some questions about influence, and all of a sudden this brother is taken out. And again, as I said before, that does not undermine like these different art conspiracy theories. All that does is reinforce them. Um, all it does is build resentment in certain communities when you see somebody exercising this kind of power over your people, where they're putting you in check and all that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, so I just had to mention that about 50 Cent, man. It's just a shame that, and 50 Cent is one of those artists that put out those types of messages. You know, the messages about selling drugs and uh, killing people and all that kind of stuff. This man basically made it fashionable to get shot, made it acceptable. One of the first people to make it acceptable to be a snitch. But this is the man that has the nerve to criticize this brother. And there's a reason why these negative rap artists are allowed to thrive and to be all successful and get all this airplay and all this rotation and all this respect and all that kind of stuff. There's a message behind that. They're sending a message. But yet a black man that wants to is speaking out on some issues is persecuted. Is stripped of everything. So let's go into some more, a couple of other articles. So you have this article about Diddy, where Diddy is offering Nick Cannon a home at Revolt TV after Nick Cannon was fired from Viacom. And one of the questions with this situation is that, from what I understand, Viacom owns Revolt TV. Let's see. So Diddy put out this particular statement. He said Nick can come home to Revolt TV, truly black owned. We got your back and love you and what you have done for the culture. We are for the people first, for us, by us. And that was a comment that he made in the Shade Room. Let's see. There's something more here. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, so this article goes on to say that he would have to, Nick Cannon would, if he could move to Revolt TV, he would likely have to fight for ownership of the show since it's officially owned by Viacom. So his show is owned by Viacom. And that's he put out some statements about that. So even though I don't think that, Revolt TV is not owned by Viacom, Nick Cannon's show is owned by Viacom. So that means that, he can't just take his show somewhere else. And I think that that's one of the issues that he's fighting about now. So let me find that particular article. Yeah, so it may be in here. Just bear with me a second. I think it's in this article. Just wait for 1 second, please. Yeah, so in his statement, he said, I demand full ownership of my $1 billion Wildin' Out brand that I created. And he says that, and they will continue to misuse and destroy without my leadership. And then, he talks about bullying and all that kind of stuff. So he's demanding ownership of the brand that he created. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then I want to bring up a couple of comments that, I was talking to my lady about this issue, and she made some interesting points about like hypocrisy and Nick Cannon, because, he was making all these statements about melanin and all that kind of stuff, and, certain traits of people that don't have melanin, but yet he's married to a Mariah Carey who has little to no melanin. And then he has these very light children from his marriage to her. So what is he saying about his choices, to be with Mariah Carey? And what is he saying about his children? And, I think that those are some interesting points. It does deal with some hypocrisy. And I would just be interested in knowing, did he come to these beliefs about melanin before or after his marriage to Mariah Carey? So that's one thing that I just wanted to mention, and I'm really interested in knowing what you all think about that particular issue. Yeah, so those are some of the points that I just wanted to raise about this particular thing. I just overall, I think it's very disappointing to see this brother lose everything that he built just because he had an interview with Professor Griff. And I think that even if Nick Cannon probably fell back and just ask questions of Professor Griff and let Professor Griff talk, I think he would probably be condemned just for having Professor Griff on his show and not for questioning Professor Griff hard enough or whatever. But I mean, it would probably be more difficult for him to be criticized in that position than in this particular situation, because what essentially happened during that talk, as I was saying to my lady, we were talking about this, it became more of a conversation instead of an interview. So Nick Cannon was just talking off the dome, saying all this stuff instead of questioning Professor Griff, instead of just acting like a regular host and interviewing someone and asking them questions. It became more of a discussion. And it even got to the point where Professor Griff was asking Nick Cannon questions, and he was talking about, these particular controversial subjects. So yeah, that's just one thing that I just had to mention. It's just a shame to see this brother lose everything because of some comments that he made, for a couple of minutes, a brief, short conversation. Again, I don't think that this brother has any hatred for anybody. I just think that he was sharing his thoughts about this particular subject. I don't subscribe to that ISIS papers theory and all that kind of stuff. For the reasons that I mentioned before. But let's see what folks are saying, what you all are saying before I sign out. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Shout out to Lasheed for you. So the Up channel said more than likely YouTube took it down. I wouldn't be surprised that YouTube took down his video because of all this all this scrutiny that Nick Cannon has come under. He's come under fire because of this. So I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube wasn't pressured to take that video down. It's just a shame that this brother could have his video taken down for some comments that people may not agree with, but yet you have hate channels on YouTube. You have white supremacists that have YouTube channels. You have black coons on here that use all kinds of hate speech against their own people. They glorify and joke about domestic violence, that encourage violence against black people. There have been people on here encouraging white people to shoot black people. And this is a black person. And that person's YouTube channel is thriving. That person is fine. None of his stuff is being taken down. So there's all kinds of hypocrisy, but you make one little statement and all of a sudden your whole career is turned upside down and your channels are taken here on YouTube. Oh, so Lasheed for you said that interview has been removed. I have a screenshot saying it was removed for hate speech. Wow. Yeah, that's ridiculous, man. Yeah, and it's a good thing that I was able to watch a good portion of it. You know, I was watching it. Then I said, let me go back and try to watch the rest of it. And when I went back, it was gone. You know, I went to an article that I had posted that had a link to that video in it, and the video was gone. Oh, so Lashid says she downloaded it. Wow, that's awesome. So hopefully you can repost it or something on your site or something, repost portions of it or whatever. Man, I should have done that. I didn't know it would go down. It was like while I was at work, you know, working at home, you know, I heard about this controversy and just in a couple of hours, you know, the whole channel was taken. I mean, the whole video was taken down. And the Up channel said, yep, they're basically erasing every remnant of Nick Cannon as time goes by. Yeah, I mean that's crazy, man. That they're just trying to erase this brother just for one interview. With all the stuff you have here on YouTube, you want to shut down a brother over that? Yeah, so let's see what else folks are saying. So the Up channel said any mention of the so-called elite is going to guarantee the cancellations of one's career, especially when you're a prominent Black entrepreneur. Um, wow, yeah, I mean, I've seen people stripped of their positions from even civil rights organizations for certain statements that they've made. You know, even a militant group like Public Enemy, a group that was talking about fighting the powers that be, a group that was talking about Assata Shakur and Malcolm X and Farrakhan and all this stuff, this militant group, even they were put in a position where they had to kick out their own member because of some statements that that member made about this so-called elite group of people. That's what power looks like, where you're able to get people that have known each other for a lifetime to part ways. You're able to bend even a militant group to your will. That's what power looks like, man. And it's just a shame. Yeah, so Lashid said she would like to reload that video, re-upload the video, but it would likely be removed again. Yeah, that's probably true. But I'm wondering if you could if you could just use segments of it and then provide commentary about those segments. Perhaps that's a way to get around that. But you know, you never know with YouTube. You know, they take down all kinds of stuff. Yeah, so Lashid said they even took down her David Duke video um, as hate speech. Wow. Yeah, so Cohen Davis made an interesting point. He said it's not about attacking Judaism, new possibilities. It's about Zionist supremacy. Um, and, you know, I'll just say one thing about that real quick. Um, when I went to Howard University, the brother Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, would regularly come to Howard University and give speeches. And he would talk about this concept of Zionism. He made a distinction between Zionism, which is a political philosophy that exploits a religion, and the religion of, he made a distinction between that political philosophy of Zionism and the religion of Judaism. They're two different things. And, what has happened now is that if someone speaks out against political Zionism, they are automatically labeled as an anti-Semite. So if you speak out against the policies of Israel and their treatment of the Palestinian people or their collaboration with the racist apartheid regime, people are labeled as anti-Semites and they're labeled as anti-Semitic. And those labels are just ways of silencing people. Again, I don't condone condemning anybody because of their faith, but I think that people have every right to condemn a political ideology that supports oppression of people. And that's what you have in political Zionism. When you look at the occupation of, the West Bank and, the Palestinian people and the oppression of the Palestinian people. So, yeah, I think that was a good point that you raised. So let's go on to some of the other comments. Yeah, so the Up channel said that there were a number of people who use Nick Cannon's mixed race children to make him look like a hypocrite in regard to his statements. Yeah, and that's something that I addressed a second ago. Yeah, I think that is an issue. But, people have different, like someone may have one viewpoint at one point in their life and later have another viewpoint. Like, for instance, Malcolm X, before he got in the nation, he had been with a white woman and all that kind of stuff. But after the nation, he changed the whole course of his life. And then if you look at somebody like Mary Baraka, who at one time was married to a white woman, and later on, when he got into a certain understanding, he was no longer with the white woman and no longer dated white women. But I don't know if that's the case with Nick Cannon. I don't know if he had this so-called belief system when he was married to Mariah Carey, or if this is something that he later believed. Yeah, so Covina Man said it's a bad idea to get involved with those Professor Griff type fake intellectuals. Yeah, I think that there is a point to what you're saying, because I don't agree with some of the things that he says, and I don't agree with the, as I said before, I don't agree with the pseudoscience of melanin and all that kind of stuff. And I don't believe in the Frances Cress Welsing's theory that she espouses in that book, The ISIS Papers. I just think that that's even though there's some things that she may say that are valid, I just don't agree with that philosophy. I think that it all comes down to, a big part of it is economics, and racism is just used as a tool to perpetuate the interests of the power elite in this country and to divide working people and, different people that are exploited. So let's see. Yeah, so Covina Man said Nick Cannon needed to vet those who he lets on his show. Any black person who's not focused on getting Trump out of office is toxic and or are deplorables. Yeah, I think that he definitely should vet who he has on his show and all that kind of stuff. I agree with that. I'm not going to say Professor Griff is some bad person or anything like that. I just don't agree with everything that he espouses, but he does make some points that are valid. Just like most people make points that I agree with and some that I disagree with. And, you know, I think that we should be focused on this election. And it's just a shame, like these people that are canceling, um, you know, this brother Nick Cannon, they haven't canceled President Trump. You know, they're not canceling him. You know, they'll regularly have him on their programs, despite all the racist stuff he has said, despite all the excuses and pandering he has done to these white supremacists. They're not canceling him on these networks. All right, so let's see. And it's really sad to see other black people like that 50 Cent, you know, trying to take advantage of this situation to kick Nick Cannon while he's down, and also trying to make themselves look good for the white slave master. You know, just like you had, you know, that scene in Django where you had the two strong black men fighting each other to please the master and stuff like that. That's how some people are. They will fight and kill their own people to please their white daddy, their white master. And that's what you have with people like a 50 Cent. And as my brother was saying, it's like 50 Cent is almost on the level of Candace Owens right now. Yeah, I would get into the Up Channel's comments about Democrats and Republicans, but that'll take this discussion way off course. Shout out to Lonnie One Love. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, so somebody said it's a double standard. How can you eradicate a man's livelihood over one podcast, but somebody like Weinstein gets acquitted for misconduct? Now, I don't know. I don't know all the details with Weinstein's case. I thought he was convicted of something. You know, I would have to Google that to find out the status of that particular case. But I mean, you make a valid point in some degrees because, like, for years, this man went around abusing women without any kind of consequences. And here you have a brother that just makes some brief statement doing a podcast, and he's completely canceled. And part of me, like, I understand like why I understand why these people would react the way they do. Like, they have the power to cancel him. And I think that if black people, we had that kind of power to cancel races, we would exercise that power. So in that degree, I understand you know, why they do what they do. I just think that it was too much. Like, I don't think that this brother in his heart is a racist or a bigot or anything like that. I just think that in some ways he's misinformed, you know. But let's continue on. So Rob said, Black first, not Jewish community first. I support Nick Cannon. So Elaine Lloyd said, who's the biggest sellout, 50 or Nick? Guess we know now. Yeah, I don't see Nick Cannon as a sellout. Like, I don't see why someone would consider him. Hold on, I skipped over some comments. Hold on 1 second, everybody, 1 second. Okay, just bear with me a second. Yeah, so Cohen Davis said maybe he didn't always feel that way, so it doesn't make him hypocritical. Um, Hold on 1 second, I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that was the point that I was making about we don't know when he came to this particular viewpoint. Yeah, so Cohen said Nick Cannon ain't lose nothing but a job in Massa's house. Um, yeah, the thing is, like, it's going to be hard for him. Like, even his show, like, he was talking about, like, possibly bringing it to another network or owning it. The fact of the matter is, he doesn't like he may face a major legal challenge over that question. Viacom is probably saying that they own it. They'll probably get somebody else to do the show and all that kind of stuff. Um, so Elaine said she doesn't think he's outspoken. I think he's uncontrolled and doesn't have a filter. Yeah, I mean, I think his statements were outspoken, like the statements that he made, whether people agree with them or disagree with them, they were outspoken. Um, he did speak on things that many people will be, many people, especially celebrities, will be silent on. Uh, as somebody else pointed out before, even a Tariq Nasheed, for instance, is not going to make any kind of statements about Jews or whatever, despite all that rhetoric, that pro-black rhetoric that he puts out here. Um, okay. So Lashid may do a stream. Yeah. So if you do a stream, yeah, I may. I gotta check that out if you do a stream. And I think at first I was like, I want to do a stream, have people join in, but I'm about to go to sleep in a minute. Yeah, because this could go on. We could talk about this all night. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about this, Lashid, because I know you talk about the Hebrew Israelites and all that stuff. And I know you're a Hebrew, so I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about this subject. Because I just find it interesting that when people claim that black people were the original Hebrews, all of a sudden they're under heat. Like all of a sudden they're attacked and stuff like that. And I don't understand like what that's about. Like, because people know that the original Hebrews were not Europeans. We know that where all these events of the Bible, they took place in lands occupied by people of color. So yeah, I don't understand like why there's so much hostility to black people when they talk about how black people were the original Hebrews. Um, so Elaine said Nick Cannon should have known you can't go for the Jews or the alphabet people. I ain't gonna say nothing. But yeah, y'all have heard that before, I'm sure. Yeah, I listened to the video too, Def Rocker, and I was like, where's the like I was like, I understand like why somebody would say, oh, it was anti-Semitic. But as I was, I mean, you would have to really dig in the weeds and um, reach some kind of interpretation because I didn't hear them attacking Jews in that particular video. Like he made statements about, the ruling elite and, influence, they were talking about um, entertainment and media and all that kind of stuff and the influence that people have in those areas. But they didn't say, well, Jews this or Jews that, or any of these things directly attacking Jews. So um, I'm curious about that as well. Like when I asked about this on my personal Facebook page, I was like, okay, I understand why somebody would be offended by the melanin comments that people made, but like, why would you be offended about the other things? Like, how are you assuming that he's talking about, first of all, just Jews owning and, dominating media? And if he was making that statement, why can't you just prove that he's wrong instead of just labeling him as an anti-Semite, as I said before? If, this particular group of people don't have influence over the media or own the media and all that kind of stuff, or have influence in financial matters, you should be able to easily point that out. Yeah, so let's see. So Def Rocker said the video is still up, but I didn't see it up. Like I tried to go to it and it said it had been removed. Um, so Cohen said that they don't have the power to remove, to erase Nick Cannon. I don't know about that, man. I don't know. Yeah, it's something when, a group of people have so much power that they can cause best friends to part ways, as I said before, man. And even in that situation, like Chuck D, like even after he kicked, um, Professor Grift out of the group and, made issued apologies or whatever, he still ended up putting out a song talking about uh, crucifixion ain't no fiction, so-called chosen, frozen, apology made to whoever it pleases, but they still got me like Jesus. Even he was talking about like, yeah, we did all these things they wanted us to do, and still these people were not satisfied. Still, they were persecuting public enemy. So this is an interesting point that Elaine Lloyd makes. She said it's hypocrisy for us to cheer white races getting silenced and then be upset when it happens to us. We should fight for freedom of all speech. So this is what I'll say about this. Like I do believe, I believe in freedom of speech to a certain extent. And I will address this. Like first of all, like Black people don't even have power to be racist. So that's the first thing that I want to point out. Like we don't own banks, we don't own like industry where we're denying people job opportunities, where we're denying people loans, where we have the power to redline people or strip people of resources. We don't control and dominate most police departments in the country. We don't dominate Congress or many of the other halls of government. We don't have the power to really be racist. So like to compare a statement made by a Black man to statements made by white racists, I don't think that that's a fair comparison due to that imbalance in power, due to the fact that we don't have the power to be truly racist in this society. So that's one thing that I would say. Another thing is this, like, I question what, The aspect with the melanin, again, I can understand how somebody can say, well, that's prejudice towards white people. I get that. I can understand why somebody would say, well, hey, that's even bigoted and all that kind of stuff. So I understand that to a degree, but the statements that they're saying are anti-Semitic, I have questions about those statements. And again, like, I don't think that this brother was being malicious. I don't think that he was speaking from hate. If you watch the video, you can see that he's not talking about hate. Like he said several times, I'm not, this is not about hatred or anything like that. I just think that it's a lack of understanding. I think that there's ignorance in some of the things that he had to say. And I think that he should be given a chance to be redeemed, man. Like, especially with all this stuff going on to our people. And this is the thing they want to focus on. This is the thing they want to clamp down on. This is not equivalent to white people with power saying something versus a black man with virtually very little or to no power. The fact that they were able to strip this brother of all these things proves that he doesn't have power. But I understand your point, and I think that there's something to your point. But I think that there's a difference between people speaking out based on their historical experiences, man. Based on the history of race, racism in this country, the history of, slavery and Jim Crow and all that kind of stuff, and the continual history of the oppression of black people in this country. I think that because of that historical context, those two things can't be compared. A statement from a little black man with zero power versus statements from people in power like a Donald Trump or others, or people with influence, whether that's in Hollywood or whatever, making statements. I think that those are two different things. But I understand, your point. And I think that there's some validity in your point, but I just think that it's an exaggeration to pretend like both of those things are morally equivalent or equal. And I don't think in all situations people should be silenced. Like here on YouTube, for instance, I no longer believe in people's videos being taken down because of things that they have said. I think that the best way to deal with bad speech is to have better speech, as others have said. The best way to deal with faulty or false ideas is to challenge those ideas with facts and information. And that's what these people should have done here. Challenged his ideas with facts and information instead of simply labeling him and eliminating his voice. Just bear with me. I'm looking through. Yeah, and I think Def Rocker made an interesting point about Ethiopian Jews and what's happening to them in Israel and stuff. Again, that's an example of racism within these groups. Like, while these people are speaking out so harshly against Nick Cannon's statements, none of these people are speaking out against like the treatment of Ethiopian Jews in Israel. None of these people are speaking out about the occupation of Palestinian lands and all that kind of stuff, and the oppression of Palestinian people at the hands of the Zionist government there. Yeah, so Elaine, you do make a good point about this, because he did do a video, like, Nick Cannon did do a video, and I think he had Rizza Islam on there, and he was talking about white women. He was talking about like trying to explain or justify his attraction to white women and all that kind of stuff. And then now you have him talking all this stuff about melanin and, about people that don't have melanin. So, yeah, I mean, so you have a valid point right there, because that's not that long ago. That was only a few months ago, less than a year ago, when he made those statements about white women. And I'm sure I still have that video on I think I did a video on that, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, that's a good point. But I just feel sorry for the brother, man. Yeah, he actually said something about white women, Rashid. You got to see that video. Yeah, so that is a question. So the whole thing about hypocrisy is a valid point for people to raise. Let's see if there are any more comments before I go. Again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And I really can't wait to see Rashid's live stream on this topic. Yeah, but this is a valid point that Rashid raises, like about Nick Cannon. Like, despite those comments about white women, Nick Cannon has never expressed any disdain for black women. And he's in the process of awakening, as Malcolm X had to wake up. And it should be encouraged, not discouraged. Yeah, I think that's a valid point. Yeah, so I want to thank y'all for tuning in. I truly appreciate it. Peace and blessings, everyone. Please rate, comment, subscribe, like the video, share the video, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content on here. And I really want to hear from you all that are watching this on a playback. What do you think about this whole controversy? Do you think Viacom made the right decision? Why or why not? Do you agree or disagree with the things that I've said? Why and why not? Peace and blessings, everyone. Have a good night.